Fill to Capacity, where heart, grit, and irreverent humor collide. A podcast for people too stubborn to quit and too creative not to make a difference. Hi, I'm Pat Benincasa, and welcome back to Fill to Capacity, episode 133, A Journey Through Past Lives with Bobby Sullivan. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to give a little bit of a context. The question of whether we've lived before is not a new question. It is one of the oldest questions ever asked. Ancient Egypt, 3,000 years BC, didn't just believe in life after death. They built entire civilizations around it. The Egyptian Book of the Dead was a map for the soul's journey. They believed the soul was eternal, that it traveled, and that it returned. Ancient Greece, Plato, he wrote about the soul living multiple lives, carrying memory, lessons, and unfinished work from one life to the next. He called it the transmigration of souls. Then we have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, written in the 8th century. It is still used today as a guide for the dying. In fact, the Dalai Lamas themselves are identified as reincarnations of previous masters. Fast forward to 1975, Dr. Raymond Moody wrote a book, Life After Life. By the way, I couldn't put it down. Okay, he interviewed over 150 people who had clinically died and came back. What they described was consistent light, peace, a life review. And you know what? The world couldn't stop talking about this book. It launched the serious study of near-death experiences. Those are called NDEs. Now, science weighs in too. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes form. If we are, at our core, energy, and energy never dies, then the question isn't whether something continues, it's what form it takes. Now, a little closer to home, in the Catholic tradition, people have always prayed to saints, souls who lived, who suffered, who died, and who are believed to still hear us. Saint Anthony, when something is lost, Saint Christopher, for a long journey, and Saint Jude, the patron saint of impossible causes. Now, I have personal experience with that one. When my Catholic school senior class was about to graduate, the nuns selected Saint Jude as our patron saint. Because, yes, we were that class and we were that impossible. I digress. Big picture here is souls endure, and the bond between the living and the dead is never fully broken. And today, we are talking about past life regressions with my guest. For over 20 years, he has become a respected spiritual intuitive, practitioner in energy healing. He does craniosacral therapy. That's a gentle hands on healing practice that works with the body's own rhythms. And he does past life regression therapy here in the Twin Cities. Well, welcome, Bobby Sullivan. So nice to have you here.
Pat, it's so great to be here. I'm really excited.
So, I'd like to give my listeners a little bit of background about who you are. You were a successful advertising executive and you walked away. What led you to this work?
Well, I've been doing this work since I was a little kid. I was one of those kids who had experienced seeing energy of knowing things when I shouldn't, and it never really was anything I thought was weird. I thought everyone sort of kind of was able to do that, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids, grew up in suburban Milwaukee, and so I just kind of went about my business. I had a lot of experiences as a kid, and probably when I turned about 14 or 15, I kind of shut it down, went through the normal high school partying and athletics and went to college and I ended up going to school in Iowa. I was a athlete. I played soccer for a couple of years in Iowa. The school I went to was really one of those places that was like a 100-year-old campus, and I lived in this really old building, this dorm, and I started seeing stuff like walking the halls at night and things like that. And so as I went through college, I slowly kind of started opening back up. And by the time I was done with college, I moved back to Minneapolis, moved downtown, lived in the Itasca building, which was another old building, and started really experiencing seeing energy and all that kind of stuff. And it was really a interesting string of events that happened. I seeing ghosts and experiencing that stuff gave me just horrible anxiety, and because I didn't really know what to do with all of it. And I had kind of a panic attack one day, and I just prayed. I asked God. I said, "Please help me figure this out." And it was right around my birthday in September, and someone had given me this book called Echoes of the Soul, and I read the book, and it really answered a lot of questions. And it was written by this woman named Echo Bodine. And when I turned the book over, it said she lived in Bloomington, Minnesota. And I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. So literally, I put the book down. I walked, took my big sheepdog Harriet, and went downstairs in my building to take her out. I lived on the river and walked through what was called the Open U. It's kind of like a learning annex classes, like basket weaving and fly fishing and all sorts of sort of those types of classes. And I was walking past the stand where their catalog was or their bulletins were. They used to print one every quarter. And there's a picture of this Echo Bodine on the cover of it. And it said she would be doing a lecture on ghosts in my building that night. It was Friday the 13th. I'll never forget. So I picked it up and I go, that's really bizarre. And so I went to it. I kind of stood in the back of the room. There were a couple hundred people and I listened. And she had announced in that lecture that she was starting a 15-week beginning psychic development class in Bloomington. And I was like, okay, well, that might be something I could do. That might help me. And so I signed up for the class. It was me and 30 women. And I walked in the door and Echo looked at me and she said, oh, we've known each other. And it was sort of kismet from the very beginning. Echo kind of and I hit it off. She sort of took me under her wing, and I became her sort of teaching assistant after I took the class and helped her with that class for years. And we eventually became business partners. We opened up a center together in South Minneapolis. We did a radio show called Intuitive Living on FM 107, one of the radio stations here, and then we turned it into a podcast and did it really up until I don't know, last year, or the year before, and we continue to work together today. We've been friends and colleagues for 25 years. So that's kind of how I got started. I really learned a lot from her as well as from some other teachers along the way, but that's kind of how I got started.
I'd like to mention to our listeners, we had Echo Bodine on a few months ago. She too is a nationally recognized psychic. So that connection between you and Echo It just seems like a natural evolution, the way you're
Mhm.
describing it.
Oh, and we've done past lives. We've had past lives together. I think that's why she said we've known each other before and stuff like that. So it was definitely meant to be.
Oh, yeah. So now that you bring up past lives, for someone who has never heard the words past life regression before,
Mhm.
how do you explain what it is in just plain language?
Okay. I'm going to just kind of start from the very beginning. So the way, and again, I speak from my own beliefs. I don't preach to anyone. This is just my own belief of kind of how this works. And I should note that I was raised Catholic. I believe in God, and but I don't think that we got all the information in that realm. And from research, I've found that the Bible talked a lot about reincarnation, and a lot of it was omitted along the way. So what I believe is that we all come from the same source. We're all created in the oneness, right? And I believe in that idea of that oneness wanting to grow and know itself, because that's really a key tenet in any spiritual practice is knowing thyself, right? That oneness said, I'm going to take a part of me. And that's when our soul is created. Our soul is really just a part of that oneness. And as our soul is created, we go through kind of this illusion that we're separated from that. That oneness says, go out and learn what it is to be part of this oneness. Go out and learn what it is to be love. And so our soul, as well as many other souls that are kind of created at the same time, sort of form a group, which is called a soul group. And decide how to learn. And there are elders on the other side that help us sort of learn. And one of those paths is to go to school, right? And so I believe Earth is one of many different schools out there that souls have the ability to go out and learn from. And so in that process, Earth School has a number of rules kind of to it. The law of free will, the law of duality, the law of polarity, the law of cycles, the law of attraction. And you may hear about a lot of this stuff in your spiritual pursuits. But our soul says, okay, I'm going to go and learn in the school. And so or our elders on the other side take us and they say, okay, we're going to help plan your first life. And here's some of these things that you're going to go and try and learn, and here's some of the people that will be in that life with you. And at that moment we are then like put into incarnation, we're born, but we're sort of stripped of our memory of who we are as a soul so that we can learn and experience by our choices. We have free will. And when we're on the other side, when we're swimming in love, it's really hard to understand what love is because it's just around us, right? So coming into Earth School creates an opportunity for us to learn one of those laws of duality, provides perspective. So we can learn about love by experiencing hate. We can learn about oneness and togetherness by experiencing abandonment. We can learn all of these things and gain perspective by experiencing the opposite. So we learn in the life that we chose to come into, we die and we come back and we sort of write it all down. We put it in our book of records and we rest a little bit. And then just like a kid going to school, break is over and it's time to go back to school and we choose another life. And we keep repeating this as we grow spiritually, we start to really plan our lives more ourselves and we get to make choices in what we want to pursue. And eventually we are really looking at gaining full knowledge of what it is to be love. And that's why we're in this pursuit of opening up our hearts and really being a spiritual being in a human experience. And that's in short kind of what why I think we live past lives.
Well, that's pretty thorough for a short version and very helpful. It reminds me of that sweet story. The little boy walks up to his newborn brother's crib and whispers, "Tell me about heaven. I'm starting to forget."
Yeah, and that's actually something that in past lives, especially with kids, we see kids coming in, and there's just hundreds of cases of kids young kids remembering who they were in their past lives. And there's a book out, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a boy who claims that he was Lou Gehrig in his past life, and he named all the players, he named everyone. I mean, he was like a 4 or 5 year old kid. There's no way he would know all this stuff.
Lou Gehrig played first base for the New York Yankees from 1923 to 1939. He hit 493 home runs, drove in nearly 2,000 runs, and was a two-time MVP, a six-time World Series champion, and one of the greatest hitters the game has ever seen. Back to Bobby.
He, with his parents, wrote a book about it. It's just fascinating. There's also a real popular story about a kid who remembered being a World War II pilot, and he named, the boat he was on. He named, the people that were in his platoon, all of that kind of stuff, and it's just fascinating. But we do see kids sort of losing that memory around 8 or 9 years old, and it's always fun to kind of capture that when they're younger.
Oh, I can imagine. So everybody is different. Can you walk us through what happens in a past life regression session? What clients may experience? Now, I know one size does not fit all, but are there some overarching commonalities possibly?
I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why people do past life work, right? It can be a healing modality, one of the best healing modalities ever. It can be an exploration. It can be a really like an understanding of karmic situations. So there's a lot of different things that can happen. It's different for everybody. And I've been through all of the experiences. I've probably done, 2 or 3 thousand past life regressions in the last few years, and it's different for every single person, and every person goes into it a little bit differently. Some people go very deep, some people are not as deep, but your higher self, your subconscious, is really in control of the experience. So it's not going to let you see or experience anything that you're not ready to see or experience. I've had just some crazy stories of different things that have happened.
One of the things that you've said is that unresolved things from past lives can carry forward, showing up as fears or patterns of behavior, even
Mhm.
physical symptoms. Can you give us an example of how that plays out?
Well, so I believe that the cells in our body have memory, and I do believe that even though we come back into different cultures, different sexual orientations, different body types, that energy of our cells and what make up our body do carry forward. And so, what I've seen in my experiences is that cell memory does transfer from past lives. And I can give you a couple examples of this. The very first time that I got into doing this, I was doing healing work. I hadn't been trained in past life stuff, but I'd read a lot about it. And I had a woman that came in for healing, and she'd seen me a few different times. And she came in my office, and I gave her a hug. And as I hugged her, I kind of touched the back of her neck, and she winced. And I said, "What's that about?" And she said, "Oh, no one's ever been able to touch my neck without that happening." And I said, "Okay, well, do you want to work on that?" And I didn't really know why I said that, but she said, "Yeah." And so I had her lay on my healing table, and I just laid my hand down. And within about 5 seconds, she sat straight up and was gagging. And at first, I was like, "Whoa, that's really kind of crazy." And tell me what happened. And she said, "I don't know. I felt this pressure in the back of my neck, and I couldn't breathe." And I said, "Well, do you want to keep working on it?" And she said, "Yeah." And bravely, she said, "Yeah." And so, same thing, she laid down, she started choking, and I said, and I kind of just talked her through the experience. I said, "Okay, you're okay, you can breathe. Tell me what you're seeing." And she said, "Well, I was running down this dirt road, and it was me, but it really wasn't me. And I heard this horse galloping up behind me, and all of a sudden I turned around, and this guy on the horse threw a gunny sack over my head and pulled the drawstring right up against the back of my neck." And she goes, I think that I died." And I was like, why do you think you died? And she said, well, I felt myself kind of popping out of the body, like I was floating. And she goes, the weirdest part is when I looked back at the guy on the horse, she goes, I think it was my husband who in this lifetime. And she was also in the process of going through a divorce. She was having a real tough marriage with this guy. And so it wasn't surprising that this showed up at that time. But that really prompted me into like exploring more about past life stuff. And we ended up having Julia Ingram come to our center. Julia Ingram's a real famous author and past life regression therapist out of Portland. She had written a book called The Messengers, which is about the reincarnation of the Apostle Paul. She came and just did a weekend workshop. And so we all got to do past lives and that kind of stuff. And I got to talking to her and I said, would you ever come back and train me how to do this? She said, get 10 people and I'll come back and do that. And so that's what we did. We did a 40-hour training with her, and that's how I got certified to do it. And it's been a huge part of my healing practice since then.
Yeah. You made a distinction in another conversation we had, and I really love this distinction that not all regressions are about pain. You can also recover gifts, strengths from past lives.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. I have a really cool story. So I was doing this work up in St. Cloud, and I had a woman that came in who was a mom. I think she had two or three kids, and her kids were getting to be school age. So they were going, leaving for the day. And she had been like I think she was a car salesman or something like that before the kids were born. And she said, she really wanted to get back in the workforce, but she'd lost all of her confidence because it had been 10 years since she had been in the work world. And I said, okay, well, what we can do is look for a past life where you were a woman working that had that confidence. And sometimes this works really well. Sometimes you don't have that, but we went looking. And so we go into the regression and she opens up in a saloon. She like when she went into the lifetime, and she and her husband were running the saloon in the West. And she had described that there was a card game going on in the back room. And she was a little worried because there were some kind of characters there that they didn't know. And she had just gotten a bad feeling about. And sure enough, a fight broke out, and her husband pulled a shotgun out from underneath the bar, and the suspected men in the card game turned and shot her husband, and they ran out of the bar and they killed him. And she had gotten word, they were trying to find these guys. She was working with the sheriff or whatever, and she had gotten word that these guys may come back and try and kill her because she was the one sort of testifying against him or whatever if they got caught. And sure enough, a few weeks later, they came into the bar and she was ready for him, and she shot both of them and killed them. And she then, in the lifetime, went on to run this bar and saloon by herself, and it was very successful. And she had a really powerful life. So one of the techniques is that we can gather up that confidence because it's yours, and we go through a little visualization of bringing that back into this current life. And I kid you not, Pat, this woman, she started selling Young Living oil. Do you know what that is?
No.
Young Living, it's an essential oil, and Young Living is a real high quality essential oil, but it's kind of the way their business is set up, it's sort of a multi-level marketing thing where you sell it, but you also get people underneath you
Yeah.
to sell. And within about 3 years, this woman had 20,000 people underneath her in her Young Living. She was making $150,000 a month, and she then created a cosmetic company that she sold back to Young Living Oil. And, she's written three or four books. She's started four or five companies. Like, I mean, she just like totally has been crushing it. And I don't take all the credit for it, but maybe a little bit. But that's kind of an example. Like, it's really cool to be able to gather that confidence or that strength and bring it back.
Oh, yeah. Now, I want to shift gears and I want to bring this closer to home. Now, I had a past life regression session with you,
Mhm,
and in that session, I recalled 4 different lives, not fully developed visuals, but more like snapshot images.
mhm,
But across all 4, one clear theme emerged, and something that shed real light on choices and behaviors in my present life. I mean, I was really surprised that it just like, "Oh, that's why I make this kind of choice. Oh,"
mhm.
and I could feel almost like the undercurrent of, my behaviors coming back to that theme, and what surprised me was that I thought I was gonna have, like, because 'cause I'm an artist, I'm very visual, I thought I was gonna have this panoramic view of these past lives, but instead I had one snapshot. Is that a common thing to happen, that one theme or a theme runs through multiple lives?
Yeah, and that's the thing that is so amazing is that when we view lifetimes from this side, it seems like these long, like huge things. From the other side, the energy is way different, and we can live multiple lives around one theme where we end up having different perspectives of that theme. I had a gal who came in to see me and she was having a real challenge with she had these sort of huge feelings for her next door neighbor and she didn't understand it. She was married and she wasn't going to cheat on her husband, but she wanted to understand the story and it was really like troublesome for her because it was very distracting in her own relationship and everything else. So we ended up doing 7 different lifetimes where her, this neighbor, and her husband were involved in a love triangle. In one life, she was the mistress. One life, she was the husband who was being cheated on. In one life, she was the child of the mother who was cheating. One life, she was the cheater. Like, I mean, she had lived all of these lifetimes. And once she understood that, she was able to understand sort of the connection and the energy. And it's not a problem for her anymore. Sometimes just making that connection and getting that understanding can be enough to heal what's going on in this life.
Now, there's somebody listening out there saying, "You know what? This is all imaginary storytelling." They're
Mhm.
skeptical and it's about imagination. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, it's hard for me to convince somebody if they have their belief systems around it. But a lot of times when people are doing the regression themselves, they'll say, I don't know if I'm making this up or not. And 10 minutes ago, they were bawling in the chair. You know what I mean? And I say, you can't make up that emotion. Like I could sit here and tell you to make up 10 stories and you are never going to be able to feel the emotion behind it. You know what I mean? And that emotional release or connection is probably the biggest proof for people that this is more than just something that's made up. But it's not a scientific thing where I can convince somebody, and everyone's entitled to their own beliefs.
Yeah. You've been doing this work for over 2 decades. I'm curious, how has this work changed you and the way you see yourself or the way you move through the world?
Such a great question, Pat. One of the things that it has really changed for me is how I view life and death. I mean, so you can imagine doing a few thousand of these. I've seen people die hundreds and hundreds of times. And it's really changed my view on death and on life. Typically, death is usually a huge relief for the soul that's going through it. Like it's graduation. It is one of those things where they're like, "Oh my god, I'm done with this, hard life, or I'm done with this stuff." And a lot of times it's sad too, but death is typically something that a soul is very excited to be going through and being able to graduate and go home for a soul is really on the other side. It's not here. I mean, it's changed how I've viewed death. I mean, I think that's the biggest part of it.
It also brings up, I think you were touching on it earlier, life happens. There are things that happen in our lives. There are ups and downs. People discover they have illness or they file for bankruptcy or even living today in a very stressful time.
Mhm,
There's all of these things happening. And so the idea that we are on this earth to learn things like this earth school.
mhm,
It seems like when there are extreme times, and it feels kind of like globally, we're living in an extreme time. Not to say that other generations with plagues and rampaging armies, I'm not trying to minimize that, but for our current day, this seems like a very extreme time. And so the idea of Earth School for individuals on an individual level is one thing, but is there kind of like a global Earth School of cohorts? I keep thinking that collectively we are here at this time for a reason.
I think that there are many different levels of souls, and I don't mean that other souls are better than other souls, but if you were looking at it kind of like a school system, right? You're going to have your kindergartners, you're going to have your primary schoolers, you're going to have your high schoolers, you're going to have your college, and you're going to have your graduate students, and then professors and teachers, right? And we are inundated with all these levels of souls in our lives, right? Typically, a higher evolved soul, and I mean higher evolved that they've been through the lessons, they've been through stuff. They don't have to come back here necessarily, but they volunteer to come back because they want to work on something or they want to help. Sometimes they will come back to help other souls go through things. Or let's say our soul is on a track to become a spirit guide or a teacher. Then you may come in and go through experiences that help that. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there's a lot of different reasons why we're here and why we're experiencing things. That being said, to answer your question, I think on a global level, the Earth school is going through a transition. And we are going through a process of ascension that we are vibrating from third dimension through the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension. And I think that that's what all the great spiritual teachers, Buddha and Jesus and the other ones that have come to help us understand and teach us that we have this ability to raise our light and our bodies to a place where they vibrate in higher frequency.
And is
And
that, excuse me, is that what you mean by third, fourth, and fifth dimension?
yes, we're moving from, we're ascending from the third dimension through the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension,
And
right?
what does that
And
mean? What does
it
that
means that the dimensions are really just states of vibration. So the third dimension is a relatively lower frequency vibration. And I'm trying to think the best way I could explain this. So let's say when we as humans die, our soul has the ability to come out of our body and it has the ability to cross over and go back home or it can stay here. So, like we see ghosts and that kind of stuff. Those ghosts are operating on the fourth dimension. It's the etheric plane.
The etheric plane is the invisible energy field that bridges the physical body and the soul, the life force that animates all living things. Some call it prana, some call it chi. It exists just beyond what our physical eyes can see.
And there is a higher dimension beyond that that is and I do think they keep going up. It's kind of like the piano keys. Like we have an octave of vibrations, but then it repeats in a higher octave and a higher vibration. So we're just really learning how to vibrate in a higher frequency to exist in that higher. dimension. And in that higher dimension, we don't necessarily need our bodies. We have our light bodies. And I think that that's what Jesus was here to help us understand, was that we have the ability to ascend ourselves into our light bodies. And I think that's really what we're learning how to do. In saying that, this world is in a place right now where reality is shifting, and we have a choice to operate out of the lower frequencies, which is really fear and our mind sort of controlling things, or we can operate out of our heart and out of love. And I think that many, not all, but many of us are starting to make that choice to operate out of love, or we're going to be put in that position where we have to make that choice.
I like to think of it that in the darkest of times, light finds light. And that's
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it is a choice, and we have to make a choice. Are we gonna live out of our hearts, or are we gonna live out of our minds? Now, when you think about the chakras, it's the same thing.
Chakras are the 7 energy centers of the human body, each one governing a different aspect of our physical, emotional, and spiritual well being. When they are open and balanced, energy flows freely. When they are blocked, we feel it in our bodies, our emotions, and in our lives.
Our 3rd chakra is basically our mental, our ego, our energy, right? And those first 3 chakras are root, sacral, and solar plexus. That's physical, emotional, and mental energy. That's our humanness. In order for us to move into our upper chakras, which are 5, 6, and 7, we have to move through number 4, which is our heart. So our minds have to go into our heart energy in order to ascend into those higher realms of existence, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And it just seems like the heart leads the way.
It's the bridge to our spiritual homes. Absolutely. Our minds do not know God, but our hearts do.
Bobby, if listeners want to know more information about you and your work, how do they find you?
Probably just check out my website. It's bobbyosullivan.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I do readings, I do oral photography, past life regression. I do a lot of healing work. So I do cranial sacral and myofascial unwinding. I do cord cutting. I do energy work. I'm in the Hopkins area, and I take appointments pretty much every day. So,
My last question for you. If someone is thinking, I need to do this, what is the first thing you want them to know?
well, I don't know that they have to know anything. I guess the first thing that I'd wanna know is, why are you doing it? What are you seeking? Because there's different ways to approach it. Now, you can set an intention for a past life regression, but your higher self is only going to take you, one, where you're ready to go, and two, where you need to go. So one of the things that I experience a lot is sometimes on your first regression you're going to go to kind of a simple life or something that doesn't seem real dramatic, and that is your higher self's way for some people of getting you sort of used to kind of doing that. We call it graduate work when you go to a lifetime where you've either hurt other people or, lived a very tough life. And it's graduate work because you have to sort of prepare yourself to be ready to see some of the things that you've done in past lives. And let me tell you, in every single soul's journey, we've lived all of those lives. We've been murderers and rapists and drug addicts and all that kind of stuff. Like, we've all been through that. It's part of the path. It's part of the learning for a soul. And the cool part is that one of the things that we're really learning how to do in being part of this higher vibration and being the heart is finding compassion. And you can't have compassion if you don't understand what it is that people are going through. And so we are getting to a place where we're using these soul memories of when we've gone through this hard stuff to find compassion for the other people that are on that same path.
Nicely said. Thank you. Bobby Sullivan, thank you for coming on Fill to Capacity and giving us a glimpse of the incredible work that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I literally could talk for hours about this. I do offer classes kind of around this topic. I'll probably be doing that both in person and online. So I do a class called Journey of the Soul where we cover all this stuff in depth, and it goes way deeper when you get into soul groups and soul contracts and karma and soul jobs and soul mates, all of that kind of stuff. It's fascinating.
Oh, it really is. I could listen to
Yeah.
you for another 4 hours easy.
Oh, thanks.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Okay,
And
Pat.
listeners, thank you for joining us today and take care. Bye.